Hey everyone, hopefully this is working. Apologize for any interruptions. You know what I'm dealing with right now. So let's try to go get it. All right, so we are in Unit 6, and we have a total of 9 units that we have to complete. So this one is on energy and resource consumption. Very, very important. I asked my wife the other day, like, why the United States? Why the United States, a super country? Um, or a superpower and a lot of other superpowers. What makes them a superpower? I'm here in the Dominican Republic right now, and one thing that I guess a superpower country needs to have is a stable supply of energy. And with that stable supply of energy, what do we have in the United States? Well, very early off, we were using primarily, trees. I mean, let's say early civilization, we used trees or wood. And then after, Greece, I believe, destroyed all of their forests and used all the wood up, they needed to seek alternative energy sources. And this is going to, and wood was like expensive. So only like the castles or the very rich were able to have chimneys and burn wood. But the thing about wood is that if you use it faster than it could replenish, then you're going to run out of it. And so think of energy pretty much is going to follow suit that way as well. Okay. And so think of, okay, we could use the surrounding wood. Population gets bigger. Now we're using more wood at a faster rate, more consumption. So we're forced to actually spread out our wings and use more resources. So then our next primary, if we're looking at this this graph right here, we're going to come to an understanding of what, as time progresses, what type of energy have we primarily used and what we're primarily using right now. So very early off, and when I say early off, I'm not trying to say the origination of man or when we started to understand things, but let's just say previous to the 1800s. So if we look at this graph here, we were using biomass, and that term biomass is going to mean using wood, cow manure, vegetation, material like that. And afterwards, we're going to then use coal. Coal was big. I'm just going to remind you of the Great London Fog or Smog, and that killed 10,000 people. So, is coal good? Is it bad? I want you to think of coal being primitive. I know we're trying to use it now. It's going to be typically stored with oil and gas, and it's found in the ground. Now, one cool thing about coal, I guess, if we're trying to think of cool things, is that it's stable. It's not going to go nowhere. If I took gasoline and I had gasoline in a container in my garage, I left it there for 2 years, it's going to start to, degrade. Water's going to get in there into it. It's going to start degrading. It may evaporate, turn into hydrocarbons, get released. If you allowed gas to sit in a vehicle over the winter, like a boat or a motorcycle, might not start the following year. That's what winterization is called. It's basically stabilizing the fuel so it doesn't start to degrade. So it's very reactive. But coal is a rock, so it's pretty much going to stay stable. So if I were to say if there were any type of pros, I mean, I guess it is stable. It is the dirtiest of all fossil fuels. Meaning it's going to produce the most air pollutants, specifically, and I like to remember it as NOx, SOx, and COx, NOx, SOx, and COx, and that X is a variable that could basically either it's going to take place of one carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, CO2, and same thing for nitrogen oxides, which would be NO, nitrogen oxide, or dinitrogen oxide, N2O, and NO2, nitrogen dioxide, and SOx, which is going to be sulfur oxides in general. All right, and sulfur dioxide mixed with H2O will create sulfuric acid. Specifically with coal, sulfuric acid is an issue. And so when sulfur gets released into the atmosphere with dirty coal, then that mixes with H2O and acid rain comes down. So that is a huge theme that is reoccurring theme when we're talking about coal. All right. Acid deposition is going to lead to the acidification of lakes, acid runoff. Lakes become more acidic, dropping the pH It could go beneath the threshold of what fish are going to need to survive. Anyhow, so we used a bunch of coal. Coal is very heavy. Can it flow? It does not flow. So if I were to try to ship coal from, let's say, point A to point B, it has to be loaded up to perhaps a train, and that's why we had developed like heavy trains in the United States, and it had to be shipped from one location to another. Very different from, let's say, oil or gas. Oil flows. We can have a pipe and we could flow that oil. So, in essence, oil is pretty cool. You can maneuver it a little easier. You don't have to have someone shovel it or machines shoveling. You could just pump it. But think how easy it is to transport gas. It's very light, or natural gas, methane. And so that is even easier to transport. However, there is a caveat to that too. So, what happens when there's a hole in the pipe? Now all that gas can escape, and so that could it is a greenhouse gas, which is definitely going to be worse for the environment to release. So I'm just trying to give you an understanding if there's pros and cons to all these fossil fuels. Of course, we want to get off of fossil fuels. We want to get off of non-renewable resources and use renewable resources, and so that is an issue. Hold on one second here. So back. Sorry for the disruption. So we're discussing gas, or the easy to transport natural gas, and natural gas, as opposed to coal, is going to have a lot less sulfur in its emissions. It's great because it can be shipped very easily or transported through a pipeline. And so there are some pros if I was thinking of how we're going to get this gas. But my initial thought, right? So, like, Dominican Republic is small, the United States is huge. So, if we do have an energy source, that energy source needs to be widespread. Transport is important for that. So, I was thinking, that's probably one of the reasons why we have tend to be a little more easily developed, and easier to develop in countries like that. So a stable energy supply is important. Food is also important as well. So we have renewable and non-renewable energy sources. I know you've heard about these for quite some time, so I don't want to go over them in detail. But let's look at this chart one more time, become familiar with it. So, very early off, the 1800s, during the Industrial Revolution, we took off with coal. And this is the United States. And so in the early 1800s, you used a lot of coal. As you start to see in the 1900s, we started to use petroleum. And it looks between 1950, where petroleum, which is oil, same word, which is crude oil, same word, petroleum, crude oil, which is now gasoline is made from petroleum, crude oil. Okay. Diesel fuel is made from petroleum. Okay. Kerosene is made from petroleum. These are all different grades of petroleum. Petroleum has to be refined. And what does that mean? It means purified, if you will. And then it'll produce these fuels. The difference between gasoline and diesel fuel is going to be its flammability, if you will. And so different engines are going to be designed to uh, burn and explode with the gasoline versus the diesel fuel versus kerosene. Gasoline is going to be the cleanest burning. Once again, it's still dirty. And then you even have grades of gasoline. You have, if you go to the gas station, you have regular, plus, and supreme. But what's really the difference? It's pure. It's basically refined and cleaner, if you will, because this is just a mixture of hydrocarbons, but there's still sulfur, there's still impurities in it, and as this flammable liquid explodes, it's going to leave little residues in the smoke that happens in your engine as it pushes up and down these pistons. So if you have, let's say, a performance vehicle, you may want to put supreme gas in it because it's going to explode the most, because it's the purest flammable type of fuel, and it's going to leave less of a residue, so that plastic ring on your piston doesn't necessarily degrade faster, as opposed to if you use, let's say, a poorer grade fuel. I don't know if certain gas stations have better or worse, you know, grade fuels. I know with our brand new vehicle, we tend to put plus. You know, there's a finance thing there. Do you get the Supreme? If your engine's not designed for Supreme, maybe you shouldn't get Supreme. Should you put regular? Or should you put plus? We put plus in. On my boat, I put plus as well. But somebody told me not to put plus in the boat because it might be too strong for the boat. I think I put plus in the boat, uh, and I pray that it lasts a long time. Okay, so you learned a lot there. Petroleum is pretty much jet fuel. You can make a lot of these fuels from these things. Is it jet fuel? I'm not necessarily sure. That might actually be alcohol, but I know a lot. I know gasoline, kerosene, diesel fuel. All these. I'm gonna throw jet fuel in there. Are gonna be products of petroleum. Even plastic is made from petroleum as well. So a lot of things are made from petroleum. If you look at this chart, you're just seeing that we are now using mostly petroleum and coal. As of it was kind of battling between natural gas, but coal's on a down spike right now, and natural gas is on an upswing right now. Perhaps in the future we'll design vehicles that can use natural gas. That might be a way that we may move towards the future. I know we're trying to move to a bunch of different ways, and so we'll see. Now, another thing. This is a very famous graph, by the way. Please understand. Oh, we started with coal. Oh, petroleum is the master now. Oh, natural gas is our second. Coal's on a downswing. Let's look at what happened to nuclear. So nuclear became an energy source in the 70s, and it kind of stabilized. And neither that we're actually using more or less. Let me come back to that in a second here. Sorry, swap rooms. Hopefully, it's working. The baby was getting a little crazy. So I was talking about nuclear power, and nuclear power was like the thing in the 70s, and it constructed a lot of nuclear power plants, and that was supposed to be the next big thing because it doesn't release any any harmful emissions, no greenhouse gases. And that was great. However, what happened is in the 70s, a couple of nuclear accidents. You've probably seen a show. It was released last year or 2 years ago, Chernobyl. There was another incident, Fukushima in Japan, and that was recent, I believe, in 2011. And there was another one in the 70s, Three Mile Island, that happened in Pennsylvania. Now, with these nuclear catastrophes, it generated a big scare. And so nuclear has not really bounced back from that. People don't necessarily want a nuclear power plant built in their backyard. Specifically in Chernobyl, you can go crazy on Google with that, and you can see animals of Chernobyl, which are probably fake. But they had to evacuate a city, and it's not like they could have went back in a week. They had to evacuate that city, misplace, displace all those people that live there, and leave that place vacant to this day. You can go there on tours, but you really can't stay there uh, longer for a particular situation. So, it is where it is with nuclear. Nuclear power plants last about 50 years. They've always tried. The we have been trying. We, it's a battle, right? What energy source can we use? And there's pros and cons on both. Do we continue using these fossil fuels, or do we use nuclear power, or do we develop alternative fuels? So let's look at the alternative fuels on here. And we're pretty low. Okay, we're pretty low. Of course, we're trying to change that. Um, and there are issues regarding those as well. But I think that's a good introduction between non-renewable and renewable resources. Fossil fuels are all non-renewable. Renewable will include biomass. It will include many other resources, which we'll talk in a couple of slides here. Nuclear is non-renewable, but it is considered an alternative energy source. Right? Know that vocabulary. Let's continue. All right. So I know I asked you before to show me how electricity is actually made. Electricity is simply made by turning a turbine in a generator. You could do anything to turn this turbine. Uh, and you could have a hamster and a wheel do this. I've created electricity by powering a bicycle, turning a turbine. It's like a handle, and a generator is going to have like a magnetic coil, a coil and a magnet inside of it. And as you generate this or spin this coil around a magnet, you're going to separate electrons and from protons and generate a current. Okay. Many of our power plants boil water right now. And so if we're using a coal burning power plant, we're burning coal, and then that's going to produce, or it's going to boil water, and then that's going to create steam. The steam is going to be pushed through a pipe that's going to turn a turbine, power the generator, send it out through grid. You could burn oil, you could burn gasoline, you could burn natural gas. All those are going to work very similarly to that. Okay, that is pretty much how electricity is produced. You spin a turbine, and then when you boil water, you're going to be able to create steam. Steam is going to generate, turn the turbine, which then causes the generator to create electricity, and then you can send it out to the grid. Okay, so here I believe we're having coal supply. It's being pulverized. Now it's boiled. Okay, then that boiled heat energy is going to be pushed through this pipe. It's going to turn the turbine, and then it's going to power the generator. Then you have a transformer. That transformer sends out the signal this way. All right. Now that steam, follow this. That steam condenses. That's what a condenser is. It basically means something that cools it. So steam will condense, turn back into a liquid. It'll be recycled back into the system. Some of it could be purified and released, or it could be put back into the system to be reboiled. And a smokestack is going to release all that heat energy that is burning that fuel outside as well. All right. A nuclear power plant is also going to use steam. Nuclear rods are used. We'll have another slide that'll explain that. They're going to be dipped in, not the nuclear rods themselves, or could the nuclear rods in an enclosure get dipped into water, which creates the steam, turns a turbine. Uh, Hydroelectric power is going to use the power of gravity to turn the turbine, and that's going to power it. We could use turbines like wind turbines. That's going to just pretty much, the turbine is now creating electricity by turning the generator inside there. And so all these things work by making something spin. All right. Photovoltaics don't work that way. We'll talk about those later. All right. So here is your generator and the coiled copper. That coiled copper is going to spin, and that's going to create your electricity. So magnets and coiled coppers. Now, this is how they work. The longevity of how long the generator is going to work is depending on the quality of the materials of the copper that's used and the quality of the magnets. So these can last up to 20 to 50 years, and then you're probably going to have to get new ones or repurify or recycle these things and then put them back together. All right. Okay, remember how I was talking about, this will be our last slide for today, petroleum, crude oil, all of those things are going to be made from oil. Okay. Now imagine this is a refinery. We have a bunch of these down next to Seawarren, right there on the water. You've seen these in Newark, and you see these in Elizabeth as well. Please watch these films by clicking on the links um, in the link in the presentation that I put in Google Classroom. All right. Look at all these. If you slowly boil, imagine crude oil is this black, thick oil. If you slowly boil it, slowly heat it up, it's going to now separate, all right, depending on the densities. The one that's all the way up top, all right, the fuel that's all the way up top is going to be gasoline vapors or gasoline. Look, jet fuel will be here. Diesel is a lot heavier. All right. Here's gas oil, all the different ones. So if I were ever to try to explain to you how do you refine certain fuels, basically you slowly boil them. When you slowly boil them, they'll separate depending on densities. And then you could siphon off and then get the different qualities of these fuels. Plus, unleaded, regular, that's going to be the tip. Supreme is going to be the tippy top of all that fuel. So all the heavier particulates or any of the things that are mixed that shouldn't be in there, that'll be in the heavier fuels. Okay, typically the more refined fuels are more expensive. Okay, hopefully you learned a little bit about this. Um, Please watch this film. It tells you how oil is pumped. And let's see if this will load into Edpuzzle. I hope you enjoy your day.